Okay, so get this, right? Picture this. You're walking through the woods, like a nice fall day, crisp autumn afternoon, and you come across a bassinet box, like the kind you would see at a baby shower.
Yeah.
And you look inside, there's a small child's body.
Ugh.
That's what people in Philadelphia found back in 1957.
Wow.
That's how the mystery of the boy in the box began, and that's what we're going to be looking at today in this deep dive.
It's a story that's still unfolding, too. We're not just rehashing old facts. We're looking at how new evidence and new technology and just the dedication of people has, shed light on a mystery that seemed impossible to solve.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get to the, all the recent breakthroughs, we got to go back to the beginning.
Right.
So it's February 1957. A college student makes that horrifying discovery we talked about, and the police are immediately faced with a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
A young boy, clearly dead, but no ID, no witnesses, no obvious cause of death.
Right. And imagine, the challenge these investigators faced back then. No DNA databases, limited forensic technology. Communication was like phone calls and telegrams. It was a whole different world.
Right. And some of those details were so bizarre, right? Like the boy's hair was haphazardly cut. Like someone had tried to do it really fast, maybe even after he was already dead. Why?
Yeah.
And his hands and feet were wrinkled, suggesting he was, submerged in water. What does that tell you?
I mean, those details, those are really crucial because they suggest an attempt to conceal the boy's identity,
Wow.
and the circumstances surrounding his death. Right. The hastily cut hair, the water submersion, it all points to someone desperately trying to cover their tracks.
It's like they were trying to, erase him completely, make him vanish.
Precisely. And for a while, it almost worked. They distributed 400,000 flyers with this boy's image across the U.S. and Canada, which is a massive undertaking for that time.
Yeah.
But no one came forward to identify him.
So how do you even begin to solve a case like that, Like you have a victim, but no name, no background, no connection to anybody.
Well, in these situations, a lot of times investigators rely on location and proximity to generate leads. And one of the most prominent theories in this case centered around a foster home that was just 1.5 miles from where the boy was found.
So proximity is a big deal then, right?
Yeah.
For investigations.
Yeah.
What makes it so compelling to detectives?
Well, proximity often suggests a connection, especially in cases involving children. Think about it. If a child goes missing or is found deceased, statistically, the perpetrator is likely someone they know or who lives nearby. So it's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to narrow down possibilities.
Well, in this case, they zeroed in on this foster home because of its location, right?
Right.
But what kind of evidence, what would they have needed to actually link it to the boy?
They would have needed a direct link, right? A witness placing the boy at the home. Or a connection between the foster family and the bassinet box. Maybe an item belonging to the boy found at the home. Circumstantial evidence like proximity, that can be compelling, but it needs to be corroborated with something more concrete.
And was there?
Despite years of investigation, no direct link was ever established between that foster home and the boy, so it remained a theory, a tantalizing possibility, but without the evidence to solidify it.
So that's one theory down. You mentioned there were others, right?
Yeah.
What other explanations were explored?
One of the most chilling theories emerged years later in 2002 when a woman known only as M came forward with a horrific story. She claimed her mother had purchased a young boy illegally.
Hold on. Purchased.
Yeah.
It's like on the black market.
That's what M alleged.
Wow.
Yeah. She claimed her mother bought the boy from his birth parents and brought him home. And according to her account, the boy was beaten regularly. And after one particularly brutal beating, he died.
And M claimed that her own mother was responsible.
That's what she claimed, yeah.
Wow.
She even said her mother cut the boy's hair after he died, hoping to make him harder to identify, and then disposed of the body in the woods near the foster home.
That's terrifying. And some of it lines up with what we know, right?
Yeah.
The cut hair, the proximity to the foster home. But why wouldn't they just bury the body somewhere more remote?
Right.
Why leave him in a box so close to a populated area?
That's one of the inconsistencies that plagued M's story. There were also discrepancies in her timeline and descriptions of the events. So investigators, they tried to corroborate her account, but ultimately they couldn't find any definitive proof to support it.
So we have a theory based on proximity that fizzles out, and then this horrifying tale of abuse and a cover-up that doesn't quite add up.
Right.
Were there any other explanations?
Well, of course, there's always the possibility of, a kidnapping gone wrong,
Right.
or even a child trafficking ring. The fact that the boy was never identified, lends some credence to these theories, right? I
Right.
mean, if he had been abducted from a distant location, there might not have been any local connections for people to recognize him from the flyers.
But wouldn't there have been a missing child report somewhere? Like
Yeah.
some family desperately searching for their son?
Not necessarily. If the boy was taken from, a vulnerable family or a situation where his disappearance wouldn't be immediately reported, he could have easily slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
And that's what makes these broader theories so frustrating. They offer a possible explanation, but without specific details, it's almost impossible to investigate them effectively.
So for years, these theories just swirled around the case, right? Each offering a possible truth, but none really providing that definitive answer. It's almost like the more we learned, the deeper the mystery became.
That's often the nature of cold cases. They become puzzles with missing pieces. And each new piece of information you discover can both clarify and complicate the picture. But in this case, there was a breakthrough on the horizon,
Okay.
a development that would change everything we thought we knew about the boy in the box.
All right, now you've got me hooked. This is where things get really interesting. We're going to dive into that breakthrough and what it revealed next. So we laid out the mystery. Little boy found dead, lots of theories, but no real answers for decades. But you mentioned a breakthrough. What changed the game?
Well, remember how we talked about the limitations back in the 50s? No DNA, no big computer databases. Well, that's where technology comes in. In the 21st century, we got a new tool, forensic genealogy.
Okay, I've heard that term, but I'm not really sure how it works. Break it down for me and for our listeners.
Imagine you're trying to find someone, but you only have like a tiny piece of their family tree.
Right.
Forensic genealogy uses DNA from a crime scene, in this case, the boy's remains, and compares it to DNA profiles in public genealogy databases.
Oh, okay.
It's looking for matches, not exact ones, but relatives, cousins, distant family.
So it's like a giant family reunion, but
Yeah.
instead of finding, your long-lost aunt, you're tracing back generations to find potential relatives of an unidentified victim.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And once you find those relatives, even distant ones, you can start to build a family tree backwards, generation by generation, until you get closer to the identity of your unknown person.
And that's what they did in the boy in the box case.
Yeah.
Took his DNA and started building a family tree.
Exactly. And in 2022, after years of work by genealogists and investigators, they finally got a hit. They found enough DNA matches to build a tree that led to the boy's identity, Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
Wow, after 65 years, that must have been a huge moment for everyone on the case.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to give him his name back. It's like he was lost and now he's found.
Yeah. It's powerful, Even in the coldest cases, there's always hope. And identifying a victim, it's not just about a name. It's about restoring their humanity, acknowledging that they were a real person with a life and a family, a story.
And what did they learn about Joseph's story once they had his name? Did they find anything out about his family, his life before he ended up in that box?
Well, they were able to determine that he was born in 1953, making him 4 years old at the time of his death. And they were able to identify his biological parents through the genealogy. However, out of respect for the family and the ongoing investigation, their names haven't been released.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that must have been like to get that news, have that part of your past resurface after so many years.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's also bittersweet, right?
Yeah.
To finally know what happened, but then also to have to grapple with the circumstances of his death.
Absolutely. It's very complicated. And it brings up a lot of questions about how we handle these sensitive revelations. But for now, the focus remains on the investigation. Joseph has a name, so now the search for his killer can take a new direction.
So does that mean they're close to solving the case? Now that they know who he is, can they finally bring his killer to justice?
Well, it's definitely a step in the right direction, right? Knowing his identity lets investigators build a timeline of his life, try to track down anyone who might have known him or his family. They can revisit old witness statements, re-examine evidence, and see if anything new comes up now that they have a name to connect it to.
But after all this time, is there really any chance they'll find who did it? I mean, it's been almost 70 years.
It's a challenge, for sure, but it's not impossible. You think about all the cold cases that have been cracked recently because of, DNA and forensic genealogy. Witnesses may have passed away, memories fade, but physical evidence, DNA, they tell a story that transcends time.
So there's still hope,
Yeah.
even after all these years.
Hope is crucial in these cases. And time can be an obstacle, sure, but it can also work in investigators' favor. People's loyalties change, their willingness to talk might increase, and there are new technologies all the time that can help unlock secrets that were hidden in the past.
So Joseph's story's taken a turn then, from a mystery of identity to a search for justice.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that even in cases that seem impossible to solve, perseverance can yield incredible results.
It's amazing to think that even after they found out who he was, this case is still going. It
Yeah.
makes you think about all the other cold cases out there, just waiting for that one thing to change everything.
Yeah, it really shows you the power of never giving up, and how much forensic science has come along. I mean, years ago, something like this would have just gone unsolved. But now, with things like forensic genealogy, we have a chance at justice for the victims and their families, even after so long.
And for Joseph, it's not just about finding out who did it, right? It's also about giving him back some dignity, you know, giving him a voice after all this time.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. For over 60 years, he was just the boy in the box, a name on a file. But now we know him. We know his name, how old he was. We even know some of his family history. And that changes things. It's like taking back the power, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's not just uh, a mystery anymore. He's Joseph Augustus Sorelli, a real person, a real kid
Right.
with a story that deserves to be heard.
And his story, even with the missing parts, the questions we still have, it can really affect people. It forces us to look at some hard truths,
Yeah.
about things like child abuse and kids falling through the cracks and the systems that are supposed to protect them.
It's a reminder that even with all the progress we've made with technology and justice, there's still so much work to do so that every kid is safe and so that something like this never happens again.
It is. It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
But I do think there's hope in Joseph's story, too. The fact that we know who he was now, that people are still working on his case, it shows that we're not going to let these stories just fade away.
What about for the people listening, maybe hearing about this for the first time? What's the most important thing to take away for this? What stays with you about Joseph's story?
I think it's the power of a name. Like, for so long, he was just the boy in the box, just another victim. But giving him back his name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli, that was huge. It was like saying he mattered, that even after all this, hope and justice are still possible.
Yeah. And maybe that's the biggest message here. Even in the darkest mysteries, there's always a chance for answers, a reason to keep looking for the truth.
Exactly. Because every life matters, every story is important, and every victim deserves justice. Joseph's case shows us that. It keeps us going, makes us fight for the people who can't speak up anymore, to never stop looking for justice, and to believe that even in the coldest cases, the truth can come out.
Well said. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive on the boy in the box. It's a story that still gets to people, makes you think about things,
Okay.
and reminds us that even in the face of something so awful, there's still hope and people who won't give up.
And as you go about your day, think about this. How many other cases are out there like this one, just waiting for someone to come along and say, this is important, this person deserves justice? Maybe you'll be the one to shed some light on one of those mysteries and help bring closure to something that's haunted us for too long.